Kethvar stared at the glowing screen in front of him. His 4 eyes moved across the human military files that his people had stolen during the war. The Zephyrian command center was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers. Other analysts worked at their desks, but Kethvar felt alone with what he was reading. The files were written in human language, which he had learned to read perfectly. But the words made no sense to him. How could any species write things like this? How could they be so calm about death and destruction? He clicked on another file. The title made his skin crawl. Darius Prime Operation, Permissible Collateral Assessment. Inside, he found numbers. Millions of numbers. Each one represented a human life that their military had decided was okay to lose. Commander Morrison. Kethvar called out to the human prisoner sitting in the corner of the room. The man looked up from where he sat chained to a metal chair. His uniform was torn and dirty, but his eyes were still sharp. Jake Morrison had been captured 3 weeks ago when his ship was destroyed in the last battle of the war. The Zephyrians had kept him alive because he was high-ranking in the human military. They wanted to learn from him. What is this? Kethvar pointed at his screen. These files talk about killing millions of your own people. How can you call this permissible? Morrison looked at the screen from across the room. Even from far away, he seemed to recognize what Kethvar was reading. His face became hard and cold. You wouldn't understand, Morrison said quietly. Try me. Kethvar replied. He had studied human behavior for years. He thought he knew how they worked. But these files showed something darker than anything he had seen before. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. Context matters more than classifications. What does that mean? Kethvar asked. He felt frustrated. Humans always spoke in riddles when they didn't want to answer questions. It means you're reading numbers on a screen without knowing the story behind them, Morrison said. You see death counts and think we're monsters, but you don't know why those people died. Kethvar turned back to his screen. He opened more files. Each one was worse than the last. Planets marked for destruction. Entire colonies labeled as acceptable. Losses. Cities full of civilians written off as necessary sacrifices. The worst file was labeled Genocide Protocol 7. Inside, it contained detailed plans for wiping out entire species. The file was marked as approved by someone called Admiral Lisa Brooks. Kethvar had never heard of her, but her name appeared on dozens of these horrible documents. Who is Admiral? Lisa Brooks? He asked Morrison. This time, Morrison's reaction was different. His hard expression softened for just a moment. Kethvar caught a glimpse of something that looked like sadness in the human's eyes. She was my commanding officer, Morrison said. And the best person I ever knew? The best person? Kethvar couldn't believe it. She signed orders to kill billions of beings. How can you call her the best person? Morrison looked down at his hands. Because she carried the weight, so others didn't have to. Kethvar didn't understand. In Zephyrian culture, military decisions were made by computers. Logic determined everything. There was no room for emotion or personal sacrifice. If 1 million beings had to die to save 2 million, the computers would make that choice without hesitation. It was simple math, but humans seemed to make these choices differently. They put names on the orders. They took personal responsibility. And according to these files, they suffered for it. Kethvar opened another file. This one contained personal logs from various human commanders. The first entry was from someone called Captain Ben Carter on a planet called Darius Prime. The date was 6 years ago. Day 1 of the crisis, Carter had written. The Void Swarm has reached our system. Command estimates we have 72 hours before they make planetfall. I've been given the worst order of my career. If we can't stop them here, I have to make sure they don't spread to other worlds, even if it means. The log entry ended. There, Kethver clicked on the next entry, but it was corrupted. He tried several more files, but they were all damaged or incomplete. What happened on Darius Prime? He asked Morrison. Morrison closed his eyes. Something that still gives me nightmares. Tell me. No. Morrison's voice was firm. You want to understand humans? Then do your homework. Read the files. Learn the facts. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. Kethver felt angry. He was trying to understand, but the human was being difficult. My people think you're all monsters. These files prove it. You plan genocide like it's a normal military operation. Maybe we are monsters, Morrison said quietly. But we're the kind of monsters who do terrible things for the right reasons. There is no right reason for genocide, Kethver said. Morrison looked at him with tired eyes. That's what I used to think too. The conversation ended there. Morrison refused to say anything else, no matter how many questions Kethver asked. The human just sat in his chair, staring at the wall. Kethver turned back to his computer. He had work to do. These files contained evidence that could change how the galaxy viewed humanity. If he could prove that humans were monsters who planned genocide, it would justify everything his people had done in the war. But something bothered him. The way Morrison had reacted when he mentioned Admiral Brooks. The sadness in his voice when he talked about Darius Prime. These didn't seem like the reactions of a monster. Kethver opened a new search. He typed in Darius Prime incident and waited. The computer found hundreds of files. Most were classified, but some were accessible. He started reading. The first file was a news report from 6 years ago. The headline read, Darius Prime colony lost to void swarm, 2.3 million presumed dead. Below that was a smaller headline, military investigation pending. Kethver felt a chill run through his body. 2.3 million dead, an entire world gone. And according to the files he had been reading, the human military had classified this as permissible collateral. He looked over at Morrison, who was still staring at the wall. The human's face showed no emotion, but Kethver thought he saw something deeper. Pain, maybe, or guilt. You were there, Kethver said. It wasn't a question. Morrison didn't answer. Kethver knew he was onto something important. These files weren't just military records. They were the story of something terrible that had happened 6 years ago on a world called Darius Prime. And somehow, it was connected to why humans labeled genocide as permissible. He saved his work and prepared to dig deeper. Tomorrow, he would start reading about Darius Prime. He would learn what had happened there. And maybe, just maybe, he would understand why humans were willing to call themselves monsters. Captain Ben Carter stood on the observation deck of the Darius Prime Defense Station. Through the large windows, he could see the peaceful farming planet below. Green fields stretched as far as the eye could see. Small cities dotted the landscape, like jewels. It was a beautiful world, home to 2.3 million people. But today, that beauty felt like a lie. Captain, called Dr. Amy Watson from behind him. The readings are confirmed. The void swarm will reach our system in 71 hours. Carter turned to face the scientist. Amy was young, maybe 30 years old, with short brown hair and tired eyes. She had been working non-stop for the past week, trying to find a way to stop what was coming. How bad is it? Carter asked, though he already knew the answer would be terrible. Worse than we thought, Amy said. She held up a small device that showed swirling patterns of light. The swarm is bigger than any we've seen before. Our estimates say there are at least 50 billion individual organisms. Carter felt sick. The void swarm was humanity's worst nightmare. They were creatures that looked like black insects the size of small dogs. But they weren't really insects. They were something else entirely, something that consumed everything organic in their path. What about the defense fleet? Carter asked. Commander Morrison's ships are 2 days out, Amy replied. Even if they arrive in time, they won't be enough. The swarm is too big. Carter walked to his command chair and sat down heavily. Around him, other officers worked at their stations. They all knew what was coming, but they kept doing their jobs anyway. That was what humans did. They kept working even when everything seemed hopeless. Options? Carter asked. We can evacuate some people, said Pete Collins, the evacuation coordinator. He was a big man with gray hair and steady hands. I've got transport ships coming from 3 systems. But we can't save everyone. Maybe 500,000 if we're lucky. That leaves almost 2 million people to die. Carter said. The room became quiet. Everyone knew the math. There weren't enough ships to save everyone. There wasn't enough time. There is another option, Amy said quietly. But you won't like it. Carter looked at her. Tell me. Amy took a deep breath. The void swarm has a weakness. They can't survive in temperatures above 200 degrees. If we could heat the entire planet to that temperature, we could kill them all. How? Carter asked. The fusion reactors that power our cities. If we linked them together and caused a chain reaction, we could turn the entire planet into a giant furnace. The heat would kill every swarm organism instantly. Carter stared at her. And everyone else on the planet. Yes, Amy said. Everyone else too. The room was completely silent now. Carter could hear his own heartbeat. What Amy was suggesting was horrible. But it might be the only way to stop the swarm from spreading to other worlds. If the swarm reaches other systems, Amy continued, they'll reproduce. 1 swarm becomes 10 swarms. 10 becomes 100. Eventually, they could consume the entire galaxy. Carter's communication device beeped. He pressed a button and Admiral Lisa Brooks' face appeared on the screen. She was an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much war. Captain Carter, she said, I've been reviewing the situation. Do you have any options? Carter looked at Amy, then back at the screen. Dr. Watson has a proposal, but it's extreme. Tell me. Carter explained Amy's plan. As he spoke, he watched the Admiral's face. She didn't show any emotion, but he could see the pain in her eyes. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. How long would it take? She asked. 6 hours to link the reactors, Amy said. Then another hour for the chain reaction to spread across the planet. And the evacuation? 72 hours if we're lucky, Pete said, but only for 500,000 people. Admiral Brooks closed her eyes. Carter knew she was doing the math. 500,000 saved, 2 million dead. But if the swarm spread, billions would die. There's something else, Amy said. Someone has to stay behind to activate the reactors. The process has to be started manually from the surface. How many people? The Admiral asked. At least 50, Amy said. Maybe more. They would have to stay until the very end to make sure everything works. Carter felt his stomach turn. 50 people would have to volunteer to die. They would have to stay on the planet and watch it burn around them. I'll do it, he said without thinking. Ben, the Admiral said softly, you don't have to make that choice yet. Yes, I do, Carter replied. If we're going to do this, we need to start now. And someone has to take responsibility. The Admiral looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'm classifying this operation as Code 7, Permissible Collateral. The responsibility falls on military command. Carter knew what that meant. The military would take full blame for what happened. They would be the ones history remembered as the people who destroyed a planet. It was their way of protecting the volunteers who would stay behind. Are you sure about this? The Admiral asked. Carter looked around the room at his officers. They were all looking at him, waiting for his decision. These were good people. They had families and friends and dreams. But they were also soldiers. They understood duty. The swarm can't be allowed to spread, Carter said. If we don't stop them here, they'll kill everyone anyway. Then God help us all, the Admiral said. You have authorization to proceed. The screen went dark. Carter stood up and looked at his officers. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. Pete, he said, start the evacuation. Save as many as you can. Yes, sir. Amy, begin linking. The reactors. I want everything ready in 6 hours. Understood. Carter took a deep breath. I need volunteers to stay behind and activate the system. This is not an order. Anyone who stays will not survive. The room was quiet. Then, slowly, hands began to rise. First Amy, then Pete, then others. Within minutes, almost everyone in the room had volunteered. Carter felt proud and heartbroken at the same time. These people were willing to die to save others. They were heroes, but history would remember them as the people who helped destroy a world. We'll need about 50 people, Carter said. I'll make the final selection based on technical skills. As his officers began to leave to start their tasks, Carter looked out the window one more time. The planet below looked so peaceful. Children were playing in the fields. Families were eating dinner together. They had no idea that their world would be destroyed in 3 days. Carter pressed a button on his desk. This is Captain Ben Carter, he said into the microphone. I'm recording this for the official record. Today, we received confirmation that the Void Swarm will reach Darius Prime in 71 hours. We have authorization to implement code. 7 protocols. May God forgive us for what we're about to do. He turned off the recording and began to plan the end of the world. The evacuation began at dawn. Pete Collins stood in the main transport bay, watching families say goodbye to their homes forever. Children clutched toys, while parents tried to explain why they had to leave. Many people were crying. Next group. Shuttle 7, Pete called out. His voice was strong, but inside he felt broken. He had lived on Darius Prime for 20 years. This was his home, too. Rachel Kim sat at the communication station, coordinating with the rescue ships. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she talked to ship captains from across human space. Everyone was coming to help, but it wasn't enough. Captain Martinez reports his transport is full, Rachel said. That's another 8,000. People safe. How many ships do we have now? Pete asked. 43 transports, 12 military vessels, and 6 civilian freighters, Rachel replied. Admiral Brooks is bringing more, but they won't arrive for another day. Pete did the math in his head. Each transport could carry about 10,000 people. The military ships were smaller, maybe 3,000 each. The civilian ships were uncertain. Even if they packed people in like cargo, they might save 600,000 people. That left more than 1 million who would die. Captain Carter wants to see you, Rachel said. Pete walked to the command center. Carter was standing over a table covered with maps and technical drawings. Dr. Amy Watson was beside him, pointing at different locations on the planet. The reactor linkage is almost complete, Amy was saying. We've connected all the major cities to the chain reaction network. When we activate it, the entire planet will reach critical temperature within 1 hour. What about the volunteers? Carter asked. I've selected 52 people, Amy said. Engineers, scientists, and technicians. They'll be stationed at key points across the planet to make sure the system works. Carter looked tired. He had been awake for 2 days straight, planning the destruction of his own world. How long do they have once we start the process? 6 hours, Amy said quietly. The temperature will rise slowly at first. They'll be able to complete their tasks, and then it will be quick at the end. Pete felt sick. 52 people were going to die slowly, watching their world burn around them. And they were all volunteers. "Sir," Pete said, "I want to stay with the volunteer team." Carter looked at him. "Pete, you're needed with the evacuation." "The evacuation will be over in 60 hours, Pete said. "But someone needs to coordinate." "The volunteer teams. I know this planet better than anyone." Carter was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, but I want you to know that this isn't an order. You're choosing this." "I know," Pete said. "This is my home. I want to be here at the end." Amy looked up from her maps. "There's something else. I've been analyzing the swarm's approach. They're not just coming to feed. They're coming to breed." "What does that mean?" Carter asked. "It means if even one swarm organism survives, it can reproduce," Amy explained. "The entire planet has to reach 200 degrees. Every single square meter. If we miss even a small area, the swarm could survive and spread." The weight of that information hit everyone in the room. It wasn't enough to kill most of the swarm. They had to kill all of it. That meant the planet-wide furnace had to be perfect. "Can we do it?" Carter asked. "If everything goes perfectly," Amy said. "But we'll need people at every reactor site to make sure the process works. And they'll need to stay until the very end." Rachel's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, Admiral, Brooks is on the line." Carter pressed a button. Admiral Brooks' face appeared on the screen. She looked older than she had 2 days ago. "Captain, what's the status?" she asked. "Evacuation is proceeding," Carter said. "We estimate we can save about 600,000 people. The reactor linkage will be complete in 4 hours. And the volunteers?" 52 people have volunteered to stay behind," Carter said. "They understand what it means." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "I want you to know that this operation is being classified at the highest levels. The full details will be sealed for 50 years. "Why?" Carter asked. "Because if word gets out that we destroyed a planet full of our own people, it could tear humanity apart," the Admiral said. "Even if it was the right choice." Carter understood. The military would take the blame. They would be remembered as the people who committed genocide, but the volunteers would be forgotten. Their sacrifice would be hidden. "There's something else," the Admiral said. "I'm coming to Darius Prime myself. I'll be there in 18 hours. "Admiral, that's not necessary." Carter said, double quotes, "Yes, it is," she replied. "If we're going to destroy a world, the person who gave the order should be there too." "Watch." The screen went dark. Carter looked at Pete and Amy. They both knew what the Admiral was really saying. She was coming to die with them. "We need to tell the volunteers," Amy said. Carter nodded. "Gather them in the main briefing room." An hour later, 52 people sat in the briefing room. They were engineers, scientists, technicians, and soldiers. Some were young, some were old. All of them had volunteered to die. "Thank you all for being here," Carter said. "You know why we're doing this. The void swarm cannot be allowed to spread. If we don't stop them here, they will consume the galaxy." He looked around the room at their faces. These were good people. They had families and dreams and futures. But they were willing to give all of that up to save others. "I want you to know that what we're doing will be classified," Carter continued. "History will not remember you as heroes. They will remember U.S. as the people who destroyed a world. But you should know that you are saving billions of lives." A young engineer named Tony Walsh raised his hand. "Captain, how long do we have?" 6 hours from activation," Carter said. "The temperature will rise slowly at first. You'll be able to complete your tasks, At the end, it will be quick. Will it hurt? Asked Kate Miller, a medic who had volunteered to stay with the engineering teams. Carter looked at Amy, the scientist, took a deep breath. The heat will be intense, but you'll lose consciousness before you feel pain. I promise. The room was quiet. Then Tony Walsh spoke up again. Sir, I want to say something. I've got a wife and 2 kids. They're on the first evacuation ship. I'm staying here because I want them to have a future. We all are. Other people nodded. Kate Miller wiped tears from her eyes. My daughter is going to grow up thinking her mom was a monster, but she's going to grow up. That's what matters. Carter felt his throat tighten. These people were heroes, but they would be remembered as villains. It was the cruelest thing he could imagine. We have 4 hours until the evacuation ends, Carter said. If anyone wants to change their mind, now is the time. No one moved. 52 people sat in their chairs, ready to die to save others. Then, let's get to work, Carter said. We have a world to save. As the volunteers left to take their positions, Carter stayed behind with Amy and Pete. Through the window, he could see the evacuation ships taking off. Each one carried thousands of people to safety. Are we doing the right thing? He asked. Amy looked at him. We're saving the galaxy, but we're destroying our souls to do it. Pete put his hand on Carter's shoulder. Someone has to carry this weight. Better us than the people we're saving? Carter nodded. In 4 hours, the evacuation would be complete. In 10 hours, Darius Prime would be a burning rock in space. And 52 heroes would be remembered as the people who helped commit genocide. But billions would live. That had to be enough. Kethver had been reading for 12 hours straight. His eyes burned, but he couldn't stop. The files about Darius Prime were telling him a story that changed everything he thought he knew about humans. The personal logs were the worst part. Admiral Lisa Brooks had recorded her thoughts every day during the crisis. Kethver had found them buried deep in the classified files. As he read them, he began to understand the weight that humans carried. Day 1, the Admiral had written, I have authorized the destruction of Darius Prime. 2.3 million people will die because of my decision. I know it's the right choice. The void swarm cannot be allowed to spread. But knowing it's right doesn't make it easier. Kethver paused and looked across the room at Commander Morrison. The human was sitting quietly, staring at the wall. He had been like that for hours, ever since Kethver had started reading about Darius Prime. Day 2. The next log read, The evacuation has begun. We'll save maybe a quarter of the population. The rest will die. I've sent 52 volunteers to stay behind and activate the reactors. They know they won't survive. They volunteered anyway. How do I live with that? Kethver felt something strange in his chest. In Zephyrian culture, military decisions were made by logic. Commanders didn't suffer when they made hard choices. They simply calculated the best outcome and acted. But humans seemed to carry every decision like a wound. Day 3. The log continued. I'm flying to Darius Prime myself. I can't ask people to die for my decision while I stay safe. If I'm going to destroy a world, I should be there to watch it burn. Kethver stopped reading. Admiral Brooks had gone to Darius Prime? She had stayed to die with the volunteers? He searched through more files and found the answer. Admiral Brooks had arrived on Darius Prime 6 hours before the activation. She had taken command of the final operation. She had stayed until the end. She died there. Kethver said out loud. Morrison looked up for the first time in hours. Yes, he said quietly. She died there? Why? Kethver asked. She could have stayed safe. She could have let others carry out her orders. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, because that's what leaders do. They don't ask others to carry weight they won't carry themselves. Kethver found more logs. These were from Captain Carter, written during the final hours. Hour 1, Carter had written. The reactors are linked. Dr. Watson confirms the system is ready. Admiral Brooks is here. She says she wanted to see this. True personally. The evacuation ships are gone. We're alone now. Hour 3, the next entry read. The temperature is rising. We can feel the heat even inside the stations. The volunteers are at their posts. Everyone knows what's coming. No one is complaining. Hour 5, Carter wrote. The heat is getting bad. Some of the volunteers are getting sick. Dr. Watson says we have 1 hour left. Admiral Brooks is recording. Final messages to the families. She's taking responsibility for everything. Kethver found those final messages. Admiral Brooks had recorded personal videos for every family who had lost someone. In each one, she took full blame for the decision. She never mentioned the volunteers' heroism. She only talked about her own responsibility. Mrs. Walsh, she had said to the wife of engineer Tony Walsh, "Your husband died because of my decision. I know that nothing I say can bring him back or ease your pain. But I want you to know that he saved billions of lives. That doesn't make it right. It just makes it necessary." The messages went on for hours. 52 families. 52 personal apologies. The Admiral had taken responsibility for every single death. Kethver found the final log entry. It was from Admiral Brooks herself, recorded just minutes before. The end. This is Admiral Lisa Brooks' final log. The reactor activation is complete. The planet will reach critical temperature in 30 minutes. All volunteers are at their posts. Captain Carter and Dr. Watson have remained with me to ensure the process succeeds. I want it on record that these people are heroes. They chose to stay here to save others. History will remember this as the Darius Prime Genocide. Let it remember that way. Let the blame fall on military command. These volunteers deserve better than to be remembered as killers. The log ended there. Kethver sat back in his chair, feeling stunned. The humans had deliberately taken the blame for something that was actually heroic sacrifice. They had classified their own heroes as permissible collateral to protect their memory. You labeled them as acceptable losses, Kethvar said to Morrison, but they were heroes. Morrison looked at him with sad eyes. They were heroes who chose to be remembered as monsters. That's the worst kind of sacrifice. Kethver understood now. The permissible collateral classification wasn't about treating human life as disposable. It was about the military taking institutional responsibility for impossible decisions. It was their way of saying, we did this, we carry the guilt. History can judge us, but don't judge the people who had no choice. Why not tell the truth? Kethver asked. Why not let people know they were heroes? Because then the next group of volunteers might hesitate, Morrison said. They might think about being remembered as heroes instead of thinking about saving lives. The classification protects the mission. Kethver found more files. The aftermath of Darius Prime was documented in detail. The Void Swarm had been completely destroyed. The chain reaction had worked perfectly. The planet was now a dead rock, but 40 billion people in 17 systems had been saved. But the cost was terrible. Admiral Brooks was dead. Captain Carter was dead. Dr. Watson was dead. 52 volunteers were dead. And all of them were officially listed as acceptable losses in a genocidal operation. Admiral Brooks resigned before she went to Darius Prime, Kethver said, reading another file. She knew she was going to die, so she resigned her commission. She didn't want the military to be blamed for her personal choice, Morrison said. Even at the end, she was trying to protect the institution. Kethver found Brooks' resignation letter. It was short and simple. I cannot ask others to carry out a decision I am not willing to see through personally. My actions from this point forward are my own responsibility. But the military had refused to accept the resignation. They had classified the entire operation as their responsibility. They had taken the blame anyway. This is why you call it permissible collateral, Kethver said. Not because you think it's acceptable, but because someone has to be willing to carry the weight. Morrison nodded. We don't make these decisions lightly. We make them knowing that we'll be remembered as monsters. But someone has to be willing to become a monster to protect what we love. Kethver felt something change inside him. For his entire life, he had believed that humans were brutal and primitive. But these files showed something different. They showed a species that was willing to sacrifice their own souls to save others. The military classification system, Kethver said, it's not about making genocide acceptable. It's about making sure that the people who make these decisions carry the full weight of them. Every human military officer knows that someday they might have to make a choice like Admiral Brooks made, Morrison said. They know that if they do, they'll be remembered as the villain of the story. But they accept that responsibility because someone has to. Kethver looked at the screen full of files. Thousands of documents, millions of words, all of them telling the same story. Humans who chose to be remembered as monsters so that others could live. We were wrong about you, he said quietly. Morrison looked at him. Maybe, but we were wrong about ourselves too. We thought we were saving the galaxy. Turns out we were just saving ourselves the guilt of not trying. Kethver closed the files and stood up. He had learned enough. The Zephyrians had captured these documents thinking they would prove that humans were monsters. Instead, they had proved that humans were something much more dangerous. They were people willing to become monsters when the situation demanded it, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. Kethver had one more file to read. He had saved it for last because he wasn't sure he wanted to know what was inside. The file was labeled Darius Prime Final Transmission Logs. It contained the last communications from the volunteers who had stayed behind. He opened the file and immediately wished he hadn't. The first entry was from Tony Walsh, the engineer who had volunteered to stay behind for his wife and children. It was recorded 3 hours after the reactor activation. This is Tony Walsh, Reactor Station 7. Temperature is rising as expected. I can see the glow on the horizon where the chain reaction started. It's kind of beautiful in a terrible way. I want my wife to know that I love her. I want my kids to know that Daddy did this so they could have a future. Kethver's hands shook as he read. The volunteers hadn't died instantly. They had lived for hours, watching their world burn around them. The next entry was from Kate Miller, the medic. Hour 4. The heat is getting bad. Some of the volunteers are getting sick. Dr. Watson was wrong about us losing consciousness quickly. We're going to be awake for most of this. But that's okay. We chose this. We knew what it meant. Kethver felt sick. These people had suffered for hours, knowing they were going to die. And they had done it willingly. Hour 5, came another voice. This was Captain Carter. The reactors are working perfectly. The temperature is spreading across the planet exactly as planned. We can see the Void swarm ships entering the atmosphere. They're flying right into the trap. In 2 hours, they'll all be dead. So will we. The logs,